Hey everyone, welcome to Dark Corner Stories. Tonight, I'm bringing you a bone-chilling tale pulled straight from the depths of Reddit, a true account of survival and terror. This is the story of Jessica, a 27-year-old adventurer who set out on the trip of a lifetime to explore Africa's most remote and exclusive tribes. What started as an exciting journey quickly descended into a nightmare as she and her friends stumbled upon a cannibalistic tribe. Trapped, tortured, and forced to face unimaginable horrors, Jessica's story is one of survival against all odds. Buckle up. This one will leave you speechless. My name's Jessica, and I'm 27. I've never shared this story publicly because, to be honest, it's taken me years to even process what happened. But I feel like I need to get it out there. Maybe as a warning, maybe just to feel like I'm finally letting it go. A few years ago, I went on what was supposed to be a dream trip to Africa with 3 of my closest friends. I'm not going to name them out of respect, but we were all adventurous, thrill seekers, who wanted something different from the usual tourist experience. We signed up with this exclusive expedition company that promised access to untouched locations and tribes that most people would never see. At first, it was incredible. We visited some of the most stunning landscapes I've ever seen and met communities that were warm, welcoming, and fascinating. It felt like we were stepping into a world few people ever got to experience. But then, toward the end of the trip, the guides told us about one last stop, a hidden gem, they said. A tribe so remote and untouched by modern civilization that even the guides had only visited a handful of times. We should have said no. God, I wish we had. When we arrived, the vibe was off. The tribe's village was tucked deep into the jungle, miles away from anything, surrounded by thick, almost suffocating greenery. The people didn't greet us with the same warmth we'd experienced elsewhere. They were quiet, watching us with this intensity that made my skin crawl. But we told ourselves we were just nervous. "This is their way of life," one of my friends whispered. "We're the outsiders here." The first day passed without incident. They offered us food, odd, stringy meat that none of us could identify, but we didn't want to be rude, so we ate it. That night, they performed a welcome ceremony for us. It started with chanting and dancing around a fire, which seemed normal enough. But then they brought out these objects, bones, human bones. They carved symbols into them and handed them to us. I remember gripping mine so tightly my knuckles turned white, but I didn't want to offend them. We smiled, nodded, and went along with it. The second day, everything went to hell. We woke up early, just as the sun was starting to rise, to find the camp eerily quiet. At first, I thought the guides were just off somewhere, maybe gathering supplies or checking the perimeter, but their tents were completely empty. Their bags, their cooking supplies, even their boots were still there, but the men themselves were gone. It didn't make sense. Guides don't just disappear in the middle of nowhere. They were seasoned professionals, guys who had been navigating these jungles for years. They wouldn't just wander off without telling us. We spent the first hour searching the immediate area, calling their names, checking every path leading out of the village, but there was nothing. Not even footprints. It was like they'd been plucked out of existence. I tried asking the villagers for help. They just stood there, watching us with these blank, almost bored expressions, like we were some kind of minor inconvenience. I gestured frantically, trying to explain that our guides were missing, but they didn't respond. No words, no nods, just cold, unblinking stares. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. They knew. They knew what had happened to the guides, and they didn't care. We should have left then. We should have grabbed what little gear we had and bolted. But we didn't. We thought, maybe they're just nearby. Maybe we're overreacting. We told ourselves a million excuses to stay, and that decision nearly killed us. It happened so fast. One moment we were standing around the fire pit, trying to figure out a plan, and the next, we were surrounded. The villagers had crept up silently, closing in like predators stalking prey. There must have been 20 of them, maybe more, all holding weapons, wooden clubs, sharpened sticks, things I didn't even recognize. One of the men barked something in their language, and before we could react, they lunged. They grabbed us with a force I didn't know humans were capable of. I screamed, fought back, clawed at their arms, but it was useless. They were too strong, too many. My friend Kay was sobbing, begging them to stop, but they didn't even flinch. They dragged us, kicking and screaming, into one of the larger huts and threw us onto the ground like we were nothing. They tied our hands and feet with rough, scratchy ropes that bit into our skin. I can still feel the burn of those ropes when I think about it. Then they gagged us with filthy cloths that tasted of dirt and sweat, muffling our cries. The hut was dark, save for a faint beam of sunlight peeking through a gap in the roof, and the air was thick and stale. It smelled of earth, damp wood, and something metallic that I couldn't quite place. For what felt like hours, we lay there in silence, our breathing ragged, the ropes cutting deeper into our wrists and ankles with every movement. Kay was trembling beside me, her sobs muffled by the gag. I could hear R trying to comfort her, his voice shaky but determined. "We're going to be okay," he whispered through the cloth. "They're just trying to scare us. The guides will come back, and we'll get out of this." I wanted so badly to believe him, but deep down, I knew he was wrong. The guides weren't coming back. And these people, they weren't just trying to scare us. They had a plan, and we were a part of it. Hours passed. Or maybe it was just minutes. It was impossible to tell in the darkness. My heart was pounding so hard it drowned out every other sound. I kept straining against the ropes, trying to wriggle my wrists free, but they'd tied us too tightly. The rough fibers scraped my skin raw until I felt blood trickling down my hands. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps outside the hut, faint and deliberate, circling us like vultures waiting for the right moment to strike. Every creak of the wooden floorboards, every faint shuffle in the dirt outside made me jump. I felt like a caged animal, trapped and helpless, waiting for the inevitable. Eventually, the door opened. The light from outside was blinding after hours of darkness, and I had to squint to make out the shapes. It was them. 4 or 5 villagers, their faces painted with symbols I couldn't understand, their eyes cold and emotionless. They moved with purpose, not a hint of hesitation, as they approached us. I could feel the panic rising in my chest. My breathing grew shallow, my vision blurry with tears. One of the men crouched down in front of me, tilting his head like he was studying me, trying to decide if I was worth whatever they had planned. He reached out and grabbed my face with a hand that was rough and calloused, forcing me to look directly into his eyes. There was no humanity in them, no trace of empathy or mercy, just hunger. Then they pulled R to his feet and dragged him out of the hut. He screamed, a muffled, desperate sound through the gag, thrashing wildly against their grip. But they were relentless. The last thing I saw before the door slammed shut again was his face, twisted with terror, his eyes locking with mine, like he knew this was the end. And then the screaming started. Not just his screaming, but something else. Louder, more guttural. Chanting, drums. The air outside seemed to thrum with it, the vibrations shaking the walls of the hut. I wanted to cover my ears, to block it out, but I couldn't. I had to listen. I had to know what was happening, even if it destroyed me. The smell came next. Cooking meat. It was unmistakable, and it hit me like a freight train. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat, and I finally realized what the metallic scent in the air had been. Blood. I couldn't cry anymore. I couldn't scream. I just lay there, frozen, as the reality of what was happening crashed over me like a wave. They were eating him. They were eating my friend, and I was next. That was the moment I stopped hoping for the guides to come back. The moment I knew we had to save ourselves, or die trying. The days blurred together after that. We were barely human anymore, just objects to them, props in their twisted rituals. They painted strange symbols on our skin with a dark, oily substance that reeked of something rotten. They forced us to drink bitter, acrid liquids that made our throats burn and left us lightheaded and nauseous. Whatever it was, it made us weak, too weak to resist, too weak to even think about fighting back. The villagers would chant in deep, guttural tones, circling us as we knelt in the dirt. Their dances were frenzied, their eyes wild with some kind of unholy fervor. I remember kneeling there one night, staring at the ground, my vision blurring from exhaustion and fear. I could feel Kay trembling beside me. She whispered my name once, softly, like she was trying to hold on to a piece of reality, but there was no reality anymore. Just the nightmare we were living. And then they took her. It happened in the dead of night. I was lying on the hut floor, half asleep, when the door creaked open. My heart sank. I knew what was coming, but I couldn't stop it. They grabbed Kay, dragging her out into the darkness while she screamed and begged for mercy.
"Jessica!"
she cried, her voice breaking.
"Help me, please!"
I tried to move, to get to her, but the ropes around my wrists and ankles were too tight. I thrashed and screamed until one of the villagers shoved something into my mouth to gag me. All I could do was listen. Her screams echoed in the night, rising and falling with a rhythm that made my stomach churn. Then came the chanting, louder and faster than ever before, and finally, silence. I don't know if she was alive when they started. I don't know if she even knew what was happening to her. I try not to think about it too much because when I do, it's like I can hear her all over again, crying out for help I couldn't give. By the next morning, it was just me and T. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? We both knew we were next, that it was only a matter of time. But there was an understanding between us, unspoken but strong. If an opportunity to escape came, we'd take it, no matter the cost. That opportunity came on the 5th night. A storm rolled in, sudden and violent. The winds howled through the jungle, shaking the huts and ripping through the trees. Rain poured down in sheets, dousing the fires and turning the ground to mud. The villagers were scrambling to secure their belongings, shouting at each other in their language as the storm threatened to tear their small village apart. It was chaos, and in that chaos, we saw our chance. The ropes around our wrists had loosened slightly over time, probably from the rain soaking into the fibers. With trembling hands, we worked to free ourselves. It felt like an eternity, but eventually, the ropes gave way. We didn't even wait to untie our feet properly. We just slipped them off as best we could and bolted. We ran barefoot into the jungle, the rain soaking us to the bone and the mud slowing us down. Branches tore at our skin. Sharp rocks dug into our feet. But none of it mattered. All we cared about was putting as much distance as possible between us and that village. Every sound made my heart leap. A crack of thunder, the rustle of leaves, even my own labored breathing. I kept expecting to feel hands grabbing me, pulling me back, but they never came. We ran for what felt like hours, maybe longer. At some point, we stumbled upon a river. It was swollen and fast-moving from the storm, but we didn't care. We followed it, knowing it would lead us somewhere. Eventually, we saw lights, soft, flickering lights in the distance. A village, a real one. By some miracle, we had found safety. The people there didn't speak much English, but they could see the state we were in. They gave us blankets, food, and water, and let us rest in one of their huts. I don't remember much of that first night. I think I passed out almost immediately, but I do remember the relief. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. The next morning, they helped us contact local authorities. When we told them what had happened, they looked horrified. They knew of the tribe we had stumbled upon, and they made it clear that we were lucky to be alive. "No one goes there," one man told us. "Not even us. They are not like the others." We were eventually flown back to the nearest city, where we filed reports with the local police and our country's embassy. But honestly, I don't think anything came of it. That tribe is too remote, too dangerous, and too far removed from any kind of oversight. I lost 2 of my best friends on that trip. R and K didn't deserve what happened to them. They were good people, kind, adventurous, full of life. I think about them every day. I can still hear their screams sometimes, especially at night. I still smell the cooking meat, feel the ropes cutting into my skin. I wish I could say I've moved on, but the truth is, I don't think I ever will. That kind of horror leaves scars that never fully heal. If you're reading this and you're thinking about chasing some extreme adventure, please be careful. Some places are better left alone. Some things are better left undiscovered. Stay safe. Thank you for watching Dark Corner Stories. This was Jessica's chilling tale, a haunting reminder of the dangers lurking in the unknown. If you enjoyed this story, or it sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another terrifying tale. Do you have a story to share? Leave a comment or send it our way. You might just hear it featured in a future episode. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, not every adventure is worth the risk. We'll see you again in the dark corners of the world.